Hello everybody, thank you for attending this evening's Rother Forum. We've brought this out to Little Common. Normally we're in Bexhill with it, and we hope you will attend other forums that we do, but for this evening we're here and it's nice to see you all. Just to let you know that if you can avoid moving around, that would be good while Connor's doing his speaking. Otherwise this is all being videoed, and we get this out to quite a lot of people across the internet, so just to say that. We will be taking a break, and at the break in the conservatory there's a cup of tea that you can get, a cup of coffee, and we hope that you've got your questions ready when the time comes. So I'm going to hand you over tonight to Teresa Stanbridge, who is our Vice Chairman, and let's go.
Well, thanks Sharon, you've just said everything I was going to say. So she says, could you tell them what's happening? And, so hey, here we are. Welcome everybody. Really glad to see everyone here. It's the Rother Forum is doing its best to try and bring information out to the residents. All those things you sit at home thinking, what's happening there? What's this about? Why is that happening? We're trying to address all those sorts of things. Totally non-party political and totally self-funded. Hence things like the raffle. So if, when we have our little interval, you feel like buying some more raffle tickets, we'd be very, very grateful. We also do other bits and pieces, like last Saturday we held a tea party and raised £550 for Breast Cancer Now. We're sort of doing our best to help the community a bit. Anyway, I'll now shut up until the end and hand over to, I was going to say something else. No, that's all right. There's Connor, who is Councillor Cllr Winter, who's going to talk to us about infrastructure first, housing second, something that's been said very widely across the country, I know. Connor.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening everybody. Thank you for making the journey out this evening. If you don't know who I am, I'll just do a quick CV of who I am very quickly. My name is Councillor Cllr Winter, and I have the honour of serving as both your town and district councillor here in St Mark's, a ward that has seen some of the most overwhelming development in recent years, and yet the least infrastructure delivered to support it. I have served as both the Vice Chairman and the Chairman of Bexhill Town Council's Planning Committee, and I currently serve as the Co-Chair of Bexhill Neighbourhood Plan Committee. I have until recently sat on the Housing Development Strategy at Rother District Council, setting out where and how new development should come forward in the right places, supported by the right infrastructure. Over the years, I have worked closely with local groups including Spindag, who are here this evening in the fight against Spindlewood Drive development in Cooden, BOAG, who stood against the Cllr Walk development, residents of Turkey Road, who I believe are here this evening, and countless others across Bexhill who share the same message: enough is enough. I have delivered speeches to the Planning Committee in relation in June to the Rosewood Park extension and the Turkey Road application, which was last August. I have been consulted by the Planning Inspectorate as well on appeals such as Sandhurst Lane and Turkey Road. I stand here this evening not as someone that is opposed to homes, but as someone who demands homes to be built the right way, with schools, with GP surgeries, roads, drainage and green spaces delivered first. Hence my new phrase that I have coined: infrastructure first, housing second. So we're going to get in, that's a little bit about me. You can all leave now if you like, but we'll get into the nitty gritty of the details, and I've got some figures here, some quick figures. So across St Mark's Ward, broadly Little Common and Cooden, we are looking at, quick numbers, around 1,145 homes either recently built or in the pipeline. Those 1,100 equate to between 2,200 and 2,500 residents, new residents. That is between 1,800 and 2,200 new vehicles on our roads here in the village. And all of the associated demand that goes along with those developments, such as sewage, water, GP surgeries and schools. So that's just a quick number breakdown for you. Something that's very close to me is education. And we need to speak plainly when it comes to education. Education is not a planning consideration in law, but it should be. Under the Education Act of 1996, every child is entitled to a school place. That is a statutory right. Yet when developers bring forward applications for hundreds of homes, that right is ignored. Planning officers tick the box and wave schemes through even when there are no local schools to take the children. I have some more numbers for you. As of May 2023, so this is over 2 years ago, so we're slightly out of date now, the pupil census was carried out by East Sussex County Council. Across all of Bexhill, there are only 291 primary and secondary school places left. So that's 2 years ago, so we know we've got less than that because no infrastructure has been built. So that's 291 for a town of 45,000+ people. So if we look at St Mark's Ward alone and we face 1,145 new homes, either built, approved or in the pipeline, under the national average of 0.3 pupils per household, that means an additional 340 to 360 additional pupils just from Little Common alone. That is already more children than there are spaces across the whole of Bexhill. And that does not account for the thousands of homes we're seeing built in North Bexhill and the conversions from shops to flats that we're seeing so regularly in the town centre. And what's the result? Parents forced to send their children not to Little Common Primary School, not to Bexhill Academy, and not even to schools in Hastings, but out of town to Eastbourne, and there are some families in this village and in this town that are having to send their children both to primary and secondary schools in Kent. That is not a choice, that is desperation. So that's education. Now we're going to break it down by some recent and prevalent planning applications. So we go to the Rosewood Park extension, or as I call it, Rosewood Park 2.0. In June this year, I spoke before the planning committee on the Rosewood Park extension. I raised concerns about the lack of school places, GP capacity, transport and green spaces guaranteed. And yet the application was approved in outline application, 6 votes to 2 with 1 abstention. The most disappointing moment was hearing an officer in Rother District Council insist the developer was not double counting green space, even though the developer later admitted that they were. That is not fairness, that is not balance, and that is not trust. Rosewood Park residents are already paying to maintain their green space. Now that park, as we all know it is threatened with being paved over by a new road. That's not community building, it is in plain terms a breach of faith with residents. We're not anti-homes, but we are against recklessness. Reckless developer-led sprawl that crushes local services and tears up promises. So we moved to, I think all of our favourite topic, Barnhorn Road, the A259. It's the main trunk road through Little Common and through Bexhill. The Department for Transport's own data is very alarming, and there are some more numbers here for you. In the 6 years before Rosewood Park was built, there were 10 collisions, 15 casualties, and 2 serious injuries. So in the 6 years before Rosewood. In the 6 years since Rosewood, including the time that travel was reduced because of the global pandemic, there have been 44 collisions compared to 10, 68 casualties compared to 15, 12 serious injuries compared to 2, and 1 fatality. That is a 340% increase in collisions, 353% increase in casualties, and a 500% increase in serious injuries. This is not theory, this is not modelling, this is a real-world evidence of what happens when development is permitted without the correct highway upgrades. Lives are being risked because infrastructure was an afterthought. But there is some slight good news. Again, Barnhorn Road, the Churchill Living over 60s development that we're seeing propped up at the moment. Residents raised serious concerns living on Barnhorn Road and Howard's Crescent about contractors parking on the pavements and inconsiderate parking down Howard's Crescent. I personally visited the site, liaised with the development manager and other officers from Churchill Living, and no contractor parking signs were installed to protect residents, and there is now no more contractor parking down Howard's Crescent. But although that's a positive, it shouldn't take a councillor to get involved for a developer to be considerate to where they're building. They should already be considerate to where they're building and the residents that they're affecting. Sandhurst Lane, not many people might know about this application. It was quite a small application, but there was a fight over up to 6 homes being built down Sandhurst Lane. Locally, we won the fight. The planning committee rightly refused an application for 6 dwellings on a narrow country lane, and the refusal was sound, citing harm to the neighbouring amenity, which is Rother's core strategy OSS4, if you want to look up these policies, inadequate access and safety conflicts with the National Planning Policy Framework and Rother's policy TR3, lack of biodiversity assessment, Rother's policy EN5, and drainage concerns, Rother's policy EN7. And yet, at appeal, when it went to the planning inspectorate at government, the inspectorate overturned the refusal. That tells us something vital, that national policy framework is tilted against communities like ours. The planning inspectorate leans too heavily on presumption in favour of sustainable development under NPPF paragraph 11, while ignoring real-world constraints. That presumption must be recalibrated so that infrastructure and safety are treated as equal in weight to housing numbers. So, we move to Spindlewood. I've only covered it briefly, looking at the Spindlewood cohort down here. If you want a single example of how our planning system is failing communities, look no further than the development that will be coming to Spindlewood in Little Common. The numbers alone are staggering, and I have taken some numbers from some of your emails, so do excuse me. Let's put this into context, for example. On Spindlewood, it is proposed that the net housing density will be 43 dwellings per hectare. So compare that to the characteristics of the rest of Little Common. You have Clavering Walk, Maple Avenue at about 8 to 10 dwellings per hectare. Hazelwood Close, Old Harrier Close, about 8. Spindlewood Drive, about 15 units per hectare. Even the nearby Clavering Walk development that is going through building at the moment will only reach an estimate of 18 units per hectare, compared to Spindlewood, which is proposed at 43 dwellings per hectare. So this proposal is not in keeping with local character, as required under policy OSS4 of the Rother Local Plan Core Strategy. It is directly opposite, a suburban cul-de-sac community forced to absorb an urban scale development. But density is only the beginning. The drainage scheme, a patchwork of pipes, swales and so-called suds, has barely satisfied the lead local flood authority. It has not demonstrated long-term maintenance, resilience or protection for the internationally protected Pevensey levels. Under policy EN7 of the core strategy, policy DEN5 of the DASA local plan, and paragraph 167 of the NPPF, developments must not increase flood risk or damage sensitive habitats. Here that test has not been met. The access point onto Barnhall Road is itself legally questionable. National Highways guidance requires a 6.5 metre turning circle into and out of any large residential site. This site is only 5.5 to 6 metres wide. That's not compliance. That is a safety hazard waiting to happen on an already overstretched, as we all know, A259 trunk road. And let us not ignore the foul water pumping station. Around 140 of the 146 homes would be dependent on a single pumping facility sited adjacent to the coal stream. A single power outage, as we have on a regular basis in Bexhill, would cause catastrophic pollution into the Pevensey levels. That is not resilience. Again, that is recklessness. So that's a quick, well, I say quick, I've been going quite a while. I'll still use quick. It's a quick précis of some of the developments that have been going on in St Mark's, in Little Common, because I think that's the heart of the issue here. You know, there are other developments going on in Bexhill, but they're getting the infrastructure. We're not getting the infrastructure. We have Turkey Road, we have Spindlewood, we have Rosewood, we have Rosewood 2, we have Sandhurst Lane, Clavering Walk, and some others in the pipeline. And we have nothing to show for it. We have no new doctors' surgeries, as we were promised on Rosewood Park. we have no new shops sufficient for the village, and we certainly don't have any road upgrades on the A259. So that's the quick speech. I think we're going to take a break before I move on to what must change and what I propose must change locally, regionally and nationally. There's a lot of information that I want to get through in the second part, so get a coffee, get a biscuit, and then we'll come back in 10-15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Over to Connor.
Right, well, thank you very much, Teresa. So we covered in my quick speech before about some of the developments. So there's no point me coming here saying and having a good old moan up without backing it up with some how I, and I think a lot of people in this town and in this village would like to see locally how it's changed, regionally how it's changed, and a little bit harder, but nationally how it's changed. So the planning system is not failing by mistake. It is failing by its own design. It has been built to serve developers and not the communities, and when a system betrays the very people it was created to protect, it must not be patched, it must be torn down and rebuilt. So I have some proposals. To who I put those to, I will yet to find out. But I will, I can guarantee you, if anybody knows me, I'm like a dog with a bone when it comes to planning. So I will send these to these people and I will fight for these proposals through my life. So my first one is ending the presumption in favour of development. We need to replace it with a presumption in favour of infrastructure. At the heart of the current system lies paragraph 11 of the National Planning Policy Framework, and I'll refer to that now as the NPPF. So that's the National Planning Policy Framework. This is the so-called presumption in favour of sustainable development. On paper, it sounds harmless, but in practicality, it is the single most destructive clause in modern planning law. Why? Because it forces local authorities to approve schemes unless they can prove significant and demonstrable harm. That burden is not placed on developers who stand to make millions, but on councils and communities who are too often outgunned, underfunded and overruled on appeal. The result is very, very simple. Developments are waved through not because they are right, but because the law demands it. Again, figures. Let's take the figures between 2018 and 2022. More than 60% of major housing applications refused by the local planning committees were overturned on appeal. The planning inspectorate pointed directly to paragraph 11 and to the so-called tilted balance in favour of development. In plain English, this means unless a council has an up-to-date local plan and a demonstrable 5-year housing land supply, a target which shifts constantly depending on which government is in place, developers win by default. What does that mean on the ground for us here in Little Common and other villages and small towns alike? It means housing estates approved without school places. It means over 1,000 homes granted with no GP provision. It means Barnhorn Road, where 44 collisions and 68 casualties have occurred in 6 years, being asked to absorb hundreds more cars without a single road improvement. That's not planning, that is a surrender. I would scrap paragraph 11 in its current form, and in its place I would legislate for a presumption in favour of infrastructure. So what does a presumption in favour of infrastructure actually look like? There would be a new statutory test. No infrastructure, you don't get planning approval. Councils would be legally barred from granting permission unless demonstrable capacity exists in schools, GP surgeries and highways, or unless developers provide it up front. There would be a duty to assess infrastructure. Every local planning authority would be required to maintain an infrastructure capacity assessment, updated annually. That document would be binding in planning decisions, not advisory. And there would be enforcement and penalties, which is what we're missing from every major planning application like Rosewood Park. Developers who fail to deliver agreed infrastructure within a specified time frame would see their permission revoked, with financial penalties going back into the local infrastructure fund for the local residents. This would flip the balance of power. No longer would residents have to prove why 300 houses cannot be built without a school. It would be down to the developers to prove why they can. That is planning as it should be. Infrastructure first and housing second. I would scrap Section 106 agreements and the community infrastructure levy. We would replace it with a community infrastructure duty. Developers promise the earth, then wriggle out through viability assessments. Instead, I would legislate for a community infrastructure duty. Infrastructure delivered before occupation, automatic penalties for failure, compulsory purchase powers for defaults, and a public register for developers who don't meet their obligations. Again, we go back to education. Under the Education Act of 1996, every child in England has the right to a school place. Yet planning law, as it currently stands, ignores that legal duty. Applications for hundreds, sometimes thousands of homes, as we see in Little Common on a yearly basis, are routinely approved without any serious analysis of whether local schools can cope. The decision-making framework looks only to mitigation and a vague financial contributions, not to the hard and most important question of all of our lives, I think: where will the children be educated tomorrow morning? Let me be absolutely clear. When the law says every child is entitled to a school place, but planning policy permits homes to be built without providing those places, the system is not just broken, it is contradictory. It is law in conflict with law. So, how do we change this? Another statutory test. No major application approved unless school places exist within 2 miles for primary and 3 miles for secondary. There would be an automatic block. If no places exist, permission refused unless the developer funds and delivers new capacity before occupation. There would be a legal duty. Councils would be required by law to apply this test, overriding the NPPF presumption. Ring-fenced funding. Education contributions locked into escrow, spent only on schools. And again, penalties. If promised schools aren't delivered, as they were not delivered on Rosewood Park, permission would be suspended and heavy fines would be imposed. Again, the heart of, I think, why we're all here. The A259 Barnhall Road proves the case beyond argument. We heard the figures earlier. That is a 4-fold increase in collisions and a 5-fold increase in casualties. And why? Because hundreds of new homes have been built, feeding thousands of extra vehicle movements a day onto a trunk road with no adequate upgrades in junction design, crossing safety or capacity. Yet under the current system, glossy traffic models supplied by consultants outweigh the hard evidence of the lives lost and the families torn apart. So what needs to change? We need a new Highways and Road Safety Act. We need real-world data tests. We need to amend the Highways Act of 1980 so that decisions are not based on speculative modelling, but on actual collision and casualty data. Where serious or fatal accidents are above the national average, no further development traffic may be added without safety upgrades. We need a statutory no capacity, no consent clause. If an A road or local road is operating beyond safe capacity, planning authorities must refuse applications until improvements are delivered. There needs to be a shared legal responsibility. Where unsafe schemes are approved, all across Little Common, there needs to be liability for negligence, would rest not only with the developer, but also with the approving authority. This would make both financially and legally accountable for foreseeable harm, because it's all too easy for councillors to sit in a room with their teas and coffees and their paychecks and go, yes, I vote for that, and then they go back to Rye, because they don't live in Little Common. So it doesn't affect them. But so there would be a financial liability for them. We need mandatory safety audits. Every major planning application would require an independent road safety audit, binding on decision makers, not advisory. And we need developer funded mitigation. Section 106 and Cllr must be reformed to front load road safety measures, crossings, junction redesigns, traffic calming before homes are occupied, not years later once the developer has vanished into thin air. Barnhorn Road should be the lesson, where when the law allows development onto unsafe roads, it is not planning, it is gambling with human lives. I will not accept a system, and this is why I speak up on every planning application across Bexhill, that treats casualties as collateral damage. To be ignored in viability assessments. A safe highway is not optional. It is the foundation of any lawful community. I think this is my favourite one. We need to abolish the planning inspectorate, and we need to replace it. We need to replace it with community planning tribunals. The planning inspectorate has become a byword for remoteness and detachment. Time and again, local decisions taken by elected councillors, informed by the residents, rooted in community needs, are overturned by an inspector who may never have walked these streets, sat in the road traffic in Barnhorn Road, or spoken to the people most affected. That's not democracy, it is centralised override. Let's look at Sandhurst Lane. Refused locally on strong planning grounds, highway safety, drainage risk, biodiversity, yet overturned on appeal by an inspector hundreds of miles away. Residents were ignored, councillors overruled, and the decision imposed regardless. I would abolish this outdated system and replace it with a community planning tribunal. So how would this work? Local hearings, appeal hearings, would be heard within the affected community, not in Bristol or Ireland as they commonly are, but or a remote desk, since we've all had COVID now, we can all actually go back to work. So in the actual area. Balanced panels is also what we need. Each tribunal would consist of a planning barrister, a chartered town planner, and 2 community representatives chosen from a local pool, bringing legal, technical and lived expertise together. And the most important one, I think, we need statutory weight to resident evidence. Resident submissions, traffic counts, flood observations and local knowledge would carry binding evidential value, not taken as consideration given today. And I think we also need transparency. Hearings must be held in public, with full transcripts and open for cross-examination of developer consultants. This reform would put power where it belongs, not in anonymous offices in Dublin, Bristol or Timbuktu, but in the heart of the community. Because let's be clear, no inspector who has never queued on Barnhorn Road or seen the flooding on Rosewood Park should be entitled to impose development on Little Common. This is about restoring faith in the system. Planning decisions should be made with the people, not against them. There's quite a few here, so the next one is we need a statutory duty of truthfulness. Developers repeatedly secure permission with promises they do not keep. At Rosewood Park, there was meant to be a school, a GP surgery, were all promised and yet never delivered. So what do we need? We need a statutory duty of truthfulness. And how would this work? We need binding commitments. Promises made during planning become legally enforceable because they currently are not legally enforceable, as we have seen. You can say, I'm going to build a school with 500 homes, get the 500 homes approved. I'm sorry, I don't have the money for the school anymore, but I'll put a care home there. So we need legally enforceable. We need to find these developers, basically. We need automatic voidance. Failure to deliver facilities voids planning permission. You cannot get 500 homes approved with a school and then build a care home. You cannot propose 260 homes with a shop and then just build the 260 homes. You have to build the community first for the houses to be filled. We need sanctions. Deliberate misrepresentation triggers financial penalties paid into local infrastructure funds. Because currently, if we build along Sandhurst Lane, the developer pays a certain amount of percentage into the SIL money, which should support in the local area infrastructure improvements, but actually that can go anywhere. That money can be spent anywhere by Rother District Council in Rother. So they could build on Sandhurst Lane and build a new school in Battle. Or they could build a development in Rye and build a shop in Burwash. Not related to where the development is actually affecting the people. And again, we need transparency. All promised facilities listed in a publicly monitored infrastructure delivery schedule. Because if a developer promises a school, they must deliver a school. It's quite simple. Anything less is deception, and it must be illegal. I actually think this is my favourite one compared to the last one. It's something I came up with for hours and hours and hours. We need off-plan, an infrastructure regulator. We have Ofgem for energy, we have Ofwat for water, Ofcom for communications, and Ofsted for education, yet no independent regulator for planning and infrastructure. The result? Developers make promises, councils approve the schemes, and communities bear the cost when obligations are broken. So we need Ofplan, the Office for Planning and Infrastructure, a statutory watchdog with teeth. So what would Ofplan do? They would have audit powers. Ofplan would review all major developments to ensure promised infrastructure is delivered on time, to specification, and in the public interest. Again, sanctions and fines. These developers have millions in the bank, so let's have some of their money. Developers failing to meet commitments would face financial penalties, suspended permissions, or outright bans on future applications. There needs to be enforcement. As I said, they're just proposing something, not doing it, and getting away with it, and walking away, happy as Larry. So Ofplan could intervene where local authorities fail to hold developers accountable, issuing binding directives, because local authorities across the country, not just here locally, have got no money. Well, actually, this local authority actually won't exist in about 2 years. So they've got no money. So we need to have an independent regulator where there are no brown envelopes going through people's pigeonholes. And where there is some money, we need to have an independent regulator. And again, it's the famous word, transparency and accountability. All compliance records, enforcement actions, and developer records should and would be public, creating a system of real accountability. Infrastructure cannot be optional. Development cannot proceed on trust alone. With Ofplan, communities gain oversight, regulators gain authority, and developers gain no free pass to renege on promises. Because if energy, water, education, and communications are regulated, why should housing and infrastructure be left to goodwill alone? We need responsible development, not reckless sprawl. Now, some in the room, I don't know, some watching the video, may say, well, that's all good, but the developers, if you put all that in place, the developers will just stop building. Well, let me be unequivocal. Well, that is a good idea, actually, yes. But let me be unequivocal. That is simply not true, and the evidence proves it. Across the country, developers continue to build millions of homes each year under enforceable legal obligations set by those local authorities, such as compliance with building regulations, highway safety laws, environmental protection statutes, and legally binding infrastructure commitments. Projects are delivered successfully even when strict statutory requirements are enforced upfront, proving that accountability does not halt construction. Consider the figures. In cities such as Cambridge, Bristol and Milton Keynes, it's all taking place there. Developments continue at pace while meeting robust legal obligations for education, transport and utilities. Homes are delayed only where developers fail to comply, not because the obligations exist. So, under these proposals, and where these proposals go I don't know, but I will find out, as I said, there would be statutory tests for schools, healthcare, safe highways, truthful commitments, and a national regulator Ofplan. I was quite proud of coming up with that, actually. Developers who can deliver responsibly will continue to build. Those who cannot will see proposals refused. That is not a blockade on development. It is lawful, accountable, and community-focused growth. Because in short, enforceable rules grounded in law and evidence do not stop homes. They ensure development is sustainable, safe, and aligned with the public interest, turning reckless sprawl into responsible, community-centred planning. So we are coming to the end, so I know it's past all of our bedtime, so we will be able to go home shortly. These are not tweaks. These are not suggestions. These are new laws, amendments to laws that have teeth, they have the evidence, and they have the backing. I've not just made them up and not looked at any current laws or no statistics or not given it any foundation, pardon the pun. They are there and they are ready to go. Because every home built without a school is a child denied their right to education. Every house without a GP is a patient abandoned. If anyone can get a GP appointment, please do let me know, because I'd like your doctor. Every road without proper upgrades is a casualty waiting to happen. Because we will no longer tolerate developer-led sprawl masquerading as progress. We will no longer accept Whitehall quotas imposed without thought, without care and without infrastructure. And we should no longer endure broken promises dressed up as viability. If the system fails our communities, then the system, quite simply, must be rewritten. If Parliament lacks the courage, let the courage begin here. You've all turned up tonight, so you've all got something to say, I do hope, because I don't think anyone in this room is against homes being built. We are here to demand homes are done right and in the right places. We're not here to resist change, we are insisting better change. And let me be clear, so everyone in this room and on the video can hear it. Infrastructure first, housing second. No exceptions, no compromises, and no excuses. Because a community without schools, without healthcare, without safe roads is not a community at all. It is a hollow promise, a failed obligation, and we will no longer allow it. The message is quite clear. The fight does begin now for any new development and ongoing developments in Little Common, because we won't stop here, not until Little Common, Bexhill and every community like ours has the infrastructure it deserves. The principle is fairly simple. You'll be having nightmares about it tonight. It's infrastructure first and housing second. Thank you very much for coming along this evening. I hope you've got something out of that. If not, then I do apologise. But thank you very much.
Oh, yes, sorry. Right, thank you very much for that, Connor. It's absolutely very enlightening. I was just thinking that 10 years ago I was involved in the then Bexhill Town Forum, and this was when the developments were all just about to get underway, and we were very concerned, and we had two particular forums in that time. One, we had a representative from Bryant's, who were a major developer in the planning for North Bexhill, and this guy, he sent to me all these wonderful plans for this fabulous proposals that they'd got with everything you could ask for. It was absolutely wonderful. I cursed myself. I ended up deleting them. I didn't keep them. But it was no time at all, and that had absolutely and completely evaporated, of course. Once they got their outline planning permission, as Connor says, it all changed. The other forum that I'm particularly remembering was on the subject of school availability, and we had somebody who came along, I think it was from East Sussex, and he told how there was no problem whatsoever with school availability. And I can recall him saying that at the moment, you see, it's not very good because children are being bussed from further away because of trying to sort of distribute the numbers of children properly and all this sort of thing. So when we've got more children filling these places, we'll be able to concentrate children into the schools local to where they live. So it's going to be absolutely marvellous. I say no more. Let's any questions now for Connor? Yeah, Lynn will be bringing the microphone. Connor?
I'll try to answer them. If not, I'll take them away to the relevant person.
Okay, can you hear me, Connor?
Just about, Spencer.
Very good. I live on Rosewood Park, and as you know, a lot of the problems have arisen from Rosewood Park, about Rosewood 2, as you call it. I think only 9% of England is urban, and there's about 91% that is open space. We have the land in England to build houses. We do need houses, as everyone knows, and especially on Rosewood Park, where I live. We did have planning in 2014 for a new medical centre, and this year, in February, it was passed. So at least you could go ahead. Not one single brick has been laid because they can't afford it now. We've also had a big conglomerate of all the people in Rosewood putting money in for a solicitor to fight against David Wilson. We had about £7,000 and it went to the solicitor and they said, yeah, go on ahead. If you want to go any further, it'll probably be between £1,000 and £2,000 per person to go forward, because David Wilson has the money. They can take us to the High Court, we cannot afford it. Basically, it all comes down to money. I lived in Spain, in Valencia, for 16 years, and all the developers in the Valencia region, they had to put in the infrastructure first. A lot of them went bankrupt in 2008. They put the infrastructure in, but they couldn't afford to build the houses.
Good.
So in time, if another developer came along, they could use the infrastructure and build the houses. Here it's the other way around, as you said earlier. They build the houses, no infrastructure. You said that, you know, you've got all the ideas, you've got the paragraphs, you've got the codes, you've got the numbers. We've got all the questions. We don't get any answers. Nobody can tell us, you know, how many people have got to die on Barnhorn before they put their foot down. We've had one fatality in the last 6 months. If we had 20, would they act then? You don't know. You've got no answers.
No, they don't.
No one's got any answers.
No, they won't. I had a meeting a few months ago with National Highways, the MP, a few other councils, and the police. And we addressed this, the A259. I went through all the numbers again. And the simple, plain English response from National Highways was, well, we're not actually going to do anything. Because when you compare the number of cars annually that go through Barnhorn Road compared in relation to the statistics as I read out earlier, compared to other roads on the national highways, it's very insignificant to them. That is what they said. So, as much as I would like to see the whole thing revamped, the whole thing redug up, and new sewage laid, new pipes laid, and the road completely redesigned, I think you're more likely to see a pig fly, unfortunately, because National Highways outright said, no, we can't do that. So it's unfortunate, and it's commonly said that in Europe they've got it right. Well, in England, especially in Bexhill, we have definitely not got it right. Like you said, Spencer, they have the infrastructure first. Yes, they went bankrupt, but I'm sure they were going to build the homes, and that's exactly how it should be here. Not only in Little Common and in Bexhill, but across the country. You know, because you can't build the homes, but with nothing to support it. You know, they didn't just start building homes hundreds and hundreds of years ago in Bexhill. There were services here first. All right, they did it wrong because they put the train track down first and split the town. But, you know, there needs to be homes after there's enough school spaces. After people can get a dentist appointment. I have a friend who moved down from Croydon about a year ago to Bexhill, lives in Bexhill, can't get a dentist appointment, now has to travel back to Croydon to her usual dentist to go for a dentist appointment. I have friends, as I said earlier, that have children here and they have to travel every day and back again to Kent for secondary school education because there are no schools. Bexhill Academy is oversubscribed. Little Common Primary, when I asked in 2023, were about 2 or 3 away from being oversubscribed. There are no schools. That was 291 in 2023. We're 2 and a bit years away down the line. And no capacity has been increased in any educational facility here in Bexhill. So I wouldn't even want to dream what the number is now. But we know people are being shipped out. So, again, the answer is infrastructure first and housing second. But I completely agree with you, Spencer.
What can we do about it? This is the thing.
Well, the thing is, when these applications, whatever it is, whether it's 6 homes up at Sandhurst or 80 or 90 up in Turkey Road, 200 odd up at Friars, whatever the number is, you know, all right, we don't potentially have issues with Mrs. Miggins putting up a new conservatory. We don't quite have an issue with that. But if it's a major development, we need residents to comment. We need the objections in. Well, yes, these campaign groups do, but it's everyone else that's around. because you get the camp, you've got Spindag, you've got Boag, who may be in the room, but I don't think so. You've got Turkey Road. You get these little action groups going, and they are very, very, very good, very, very effective. But we need more residents. And then what doesn't help is when the planning committee refuse it, brilliant, lovely. Then it goes to planning inspector, as it did with Turkey Road. Well, we were there. I was there for the 2-day Turkey Road appeal, and I shouldn't probably speak ill, but you had the developer had the whole row of tables filled up with all sorts of KCs and solicitors and hobnobbing people, and then you had Rother, one person, by themselves. So how is yes, go ahead.
Yes, why didn't he speak up for us? Not once. All he did was answer to the stupid man across the way that's on television. He was canoodling.
He was yawning, he was laying back in his chair.
He was canoodling with that woman, and we had no say. She was letting us speak and letting us do whatever, but she had no intention of ever letting us win. It's not fair.
And that is the big issue.
Can I just say as well, is that
Mike,
the planning officer wasn't just supposed to be defending, if you like, the appeal,
could you hold it to you?
the rejection of the appeal, but he was supposed to be supporting the actual councillors that made the decision
Absolutely.
to actually reject that appeal.
Yep.
And they didn't say one word.
No, and that is what I was there and I know these residents, so that is one of the biggest issues.
Sorry, one other thing.
Could you wait for the mic?
You don't need to hear. You can hear me.
No, excuse me. So that we get it on the record.
He was given the information the night before. He hadn't read our file. He had no input at all. That was so unfair.
Yep.
We'd spent months getting ready for it, and they didn't even give them the information before.
No.
What are they doing to us? Because that's not fair. And who do we complain to? Because there's nobody. They don't listen.
And he's still there.
Yes. He
Complaints
didn't
were
open his
made
mouth.
by councillors, and he's still there.
And he apologised to us afterwards. He took us all into a room halfway through on the first day, and he said, "I'm really sorry, I was only given this information last night." That's appalling.
And that is the issue. Not here.
Are you going to name him?
Well, if I knew his name, I actually would, but I don't think we're going to get into that issue because then we'd be done for libel. He was the councilman representing Rother District Council's decision, and that is exactly what I was saying, and that is exactly the issue. Whenever a planning application is refused and goes to appeal, the local authority 9 times out of 10 do not defend the decision they have made months earlier. And it costs them millions to appeal. I can't remember what it costs Spindlewood. A lot of money, more money than I've got in my bank account, unfortunately. But it costs a lot of money, and that's one of the biggest issues is appeals, and that's why, in my speech, the whole system, the planning inspectorate, needs to be made redundant. Yes.
So, Connor, I wasn't at the Turkey Road appeal. So all I have heard is what my colleagues, my friends, the other residents bordering the development have said subsequently. But what I don't understand, and please if you can answer this question, is that the vote, so the planning
Committee.
the planner, the individual in the council who's responsible for the project, I can't get my terminology right, he recommended approving the project. The vote then went against it. So this is the councillors saying, no, it shouldn't proceed. What I don't understand then is when it gets to appeal, why the councillors and the council don't then provide the information to the person who has to stand in front of the inspectorate to defend their decision.
Yep.
That, to me, I wasn't there, but that does not make sense. My understanding is that because it was declined by the council and then approved at inspectorate, it has cost our council hundreds and thousands of pounds.
Minimum.
And I have got no idea about the figures. I just don't understand. I mean, everything that you've said, 100%. You know, I don't know what you're going to do with all of this, but, you know, become an MP, you know, become the Prime Minister, you know, change the whole system. But that's not tomorrow.
I need dinner first, but okay.
But that's not tomorrow, Connor.
No.
But I don't think anybody in this room is going to disagree with anything that you've said, because it all makes sense. The system is broken, but tiny little things like what happened with Turkey Road, yeah, the system's broken, but actually it doesn't even make sense how those things can happen. Why? Do they, the councillors, but not, why don't they uphold what they voted for? That doesn't make any sense, does it?
No, it doesn't make any sense. I have to be very diplomatic with what I say. Well, no, I don't fancy another complaint. So I'm quite used to complaints, to speaking the truth.
You're sticking your head above the parapet.
Oh, quite usually. Yeah.
So absolutely tell us the truth.
The officers, if the officers, as you said, say approve, the councillors come along, probably from a little bit of public pressure and all the rest of it. They want to be re-elected, some of them. Okay, well, we'll vote against what the officers have said and vote against the planning application. Sometimes the reason there is weak presence from local authorities at appeal is because the officer wanted approval. So why are they going to defend a decision that they want approved? Because, I think someone said it, I think Spencer might have said it earlier actually, it all comes back to one thing: money. That's what it comes back to. Money on every occasion. And I completely agree with everything you've just said and Spencer said, and probably everybody else is going to say if they want to have a say. You know, but it's small stepping stones, and nothing unfortunately is going to be changed overnight. But it's forums like this and giving the public a say, which developers don't do, as I established in my speech, allows us to take those steps forward.
But the council never even sent the right people that had been doing the work for it. So the woman was going, the council never even sent the right people that had been doing all the work for it. And she said, well, where's so-and-so? And where's so-and-so? And they were ringing them up and trying to find them, and they couldn't find them. This is our council. This is the people that we pay our money to, right? And they're not representing us.
I didn't see any other councillor at that appeal.
So there was somebody in front of me, and he was looking up at his phone trying to find the person that we needed. And for 2 days they couldn't find the right person to come along and give the presentation that they should have given.
I thought the whole 2 days, I can't believe it was last August, but anyway, I thought the 2 days that we were there was an absolute mockery for not only for the local authority, but also for the whole idea of electing people to represent you. You know, Turkey Road is and this is not, this is as a councillor talking about planning, but I didn't see any other councillor present at the appeal. Turkey Road is not even in my ward that I represent, but I was there. And I was speaking on behalf of myself and some of the residents at the appeal on Turkey Road and Sandhurst Lane. Sandhurst Lane is my ward. But Turkey Road's not even my ward, so where are the elected representatives who we elect? We go out, we put a little cross in a box, they take their paycheck home and go, well, I'm not coming.
So, maybe I don't understand the system properly, so please excuse me, everybody. But my understanding is that the councillors who are voting are not paid professionals. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. But if they vote against something, why are they not duty bound to then be at an appeal where they have to make representation for the decision they've made? Now you're saying that there's a financial pressure. Fair enough. But actually they've cost District Council a hell of a load of money that could be used to actually do some of the things that need to be done. Goodness knows what that might be, schools or infrastructure, you know, whatever they might choose. But their vote, they then just, I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't know who was there, but they just wander away. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
And just
so talking about accountability, sorry, Connor,
That's right.
but talking about accountability, you know, these unpaid professionals, aren't they accountable for a vote that then costs the district council thousands and thousands of pounds? How does that work?
Well,
Sorry.
that's right. They are accountable because they should be accountable on election day, on polling day. But the trouble is, without going into too much detail, the same people get re-elected and we have the same issue over and over again. And just picking up on another point that you said, it costs the local authority money, it costs you money, everyone in this room. Every time an appeal, the planning committee make a decision and it goes to appeal, it costs all of us taxpayers in this room money.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that people have got questions. You know, people speak with passion. Connor speaks with passion, and you know, it's good to see. People ask me, why are you opening a forum? I heard somebody ask, you know, what are you going to do about it? You know, what's Connor going to do about it? Connor can't do anything about it on his own tonight or next week, but it is public pressure that helps to get things going. You'll see all over the country right now, public pressure is people are waking up and listening. And the thing is, with many, not just this topic, many topics, you've got a lot of people. You've got a lot of people that A, don't quite understand, or B, they're not interested. This is why I think we started this forum, to give people information and to get these topics spoken about. Because something like this, as I said, how this works, this will go out, this recording will go out. We usually get about 500 or 600 people on our videos. And this is how we get the interest. Because if we don't do this, we don't come here, we don't talk about anything, people just become very, very angry. And you know, we're trying to make a little change here, so we're not going to shoot the messenger, because we're very lucky to have this guy coming, you know, and giving us a chat. But anyway, I hope you're all quite happy with that. Has anybody else got any questions here?
I was just going to say,
wait to the mic, please. There's another gentleman on the right and a lady at the back. Then.
Hello there. Just going back to what we can do about things, and you talk about sending in information, sending in objections. I got weary after 15 years of sending anything into the council, because nothing ever gets taken anyway. And unfortunately, it didn't seem to matter how many times or how many people object to things on quite reasonable grounds and not NIMBY grounds. Eventually, that all gets thrown to one side. I mean, it's quite a job to actually write an objection to one of these. And it's not just writing the first objection. It's when the developers change their tack and bring it in a different way, and you have to object to that, and then they do it again. I mean, with Spindlewood, what I've seen is they've done, I think there's about two or three different numbers for the application for that. With Rosewood Park, we were promised a school. In fact, when it was turned down by the Buck County Council that they weren't going to put a school there, basically the developers then put in for 70 more houses. So that's why you've got a lot bigger state than we actually thought it was going to be. I can get where you're going. I can see. I don't disagree with anything you've said. Infrastructure has always been the information I put on, but I don't know, even with the numbers going in, how that will affect the national picture really. And having done Rosewood and now with Spindlewood and all the others. And there's another one the other side of Spindlewood that's also had issues, isn't there? I can't remember the name of it. Clavering Wall. And now we've got all these others. I struggle to actually see how we can keep going, putting in these applications and objections to the to the borough council. We need help, because I've got next door neighbours who haven't got a clue how to do it, and somebody over the road can write one, and then they take it over to them. It's not easy, and it's. And I don't think it's difficult to get the numbers. I had to go down 14 houses when we discovered that Persimmons, in their application to put the junction in, was proposing to take 2 feet off the front of all of our gardens. And it was going it went into the borough council, or it was going into the council like that. I went down and spoke to all the people and said, look, do you know any of this? Only one person knew anything about what was going on. And not many of them have actually done anything. It's very hard. I don't know what you do about it, but I just think it's a bit of a reality thing, a reality check on it all. I mean, if you can comment on that, I don't mind.
No.
Perhaps we could hear from the other people.
Yes.
Just sort of pull it together.
Pull it together, yes.
There's a gentleman behind you, Lynn, wanted to say something. And then the lady at the back.
Oh, Connor, you mentioned about the accidents and the fatality on road, mainly on the Marsh Road. How many times has that road been closed and traffic diverted through narrow country lanes and across the level crossings down at Little Cooden? How many times has that road been closed, causing no end of hold-ups around for everybody using the A259?
Yeah, and we're just here from the lady standing up.
The lady at the back, Lynn.
Thank you. I think everybody in this room agrees with what you said this evening. We know some of it will take some time. And in the meantime, one of the things that I think is really important is that we work with the people, the apathy, the bees, to make sure that they do know what they can do in order to take proactive action in our communities. And perhaps as part of the video, if you can put some notes on the back saying what you can do as an individual in order to be able to take action. And I think that's what is missing a little bit, that people just don't know. They're not disinterested, they just do not know. And if all of us go away tonight, I'm so sorry about what you guys have been through. It's kind of happened, hasn't it? But in order to have it stopped in future and to have a clear voice and some equity around what we would like as a community, then we've got to be more proactive as a group. And you guys have just got some really good ideas. You've got lots of passion and energy. Let's see what we can do in terms of just getting some notes on the end of the video to say what you can do as an individual. I think that would be really welcome.
Yes, so I'll just sum up from those three. So for the gentleman, I think the ladies actually almost said what I was going to say, is I would never advocate, although yes it does happen and yes it does feel like it happens a lot, you put all the objections in and it doesn't matter whether you have 100 or 1,000 objections, eventually it goes ahead. The objections and any comment, even if you want to support the application, they are taken seriously by the councillors and by the officers, although it does not feel like they are. One example of that is what I call Rosewood 2. So it was only outline planning in June that was approved for the access, and that's still a question mark whether that's actually going to happen. And for the first time, I can't remember the last time I've seen it, but the outline was approved and everything else, all other material considerations they normally go back to the officer to approve. So once outline approved, everything else goes to the officer to approve. They do a tick box, density, layout, blah, 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 where the parks go. Everything like that for the first time, because of the resident group on Rosewood and what they did and what they said at the planning committee, every other material consideration is going back to the planning committee and for the councillors to vote on, not the officers, it's the councillors. So I would never advocate, and it's annoying and it's boring and it's hard and it's long, but as the lady said, I think we'll put some notes on the end of the video. If anyone across Bexhill watching the video or in the room or knows anybody that needs help with writing an objection for whatever planning application, not just in Little Common, more than happy to help. There are lots of experts in the room, so do mingle afterwards, but I'm more than happy to help. So yeah, the ladies picked that up. Another question?
Can I just say one final thing? I'm just like to say to Connor, we've been hammering the planning officers for genuine reasons, but the issue actually comes down is that the planning officers are only delivering what the government has told them they've got to deliver.
Yeah.
What if you like, analysis has been undertaken by the planning officers to determine what's necessary to meet the requirements in planning for the area, and also including growth from whatever the difference is between what the government say and what the local planning officers say, because they go developing, if you like, a strategic planning requirement and identifying individual areas, and they go out to consultation, and it's pure tokenism, because it means nothing, because from our experience is that Turkey Road wasn't in there, yet the developers wanted it, the planners needed the money to meet their targets, so they approved it, and then they had to fight to keep it. So I can understand where they're coming from, I can understand both sides. The system just does not work. And they will now they went through the consultation, and now they're looking to backdate the approval, acceptance of the consultation to 2020, which is 2 years after or before the actual developments have gone through. So it's difficult for everybody, I realise that. But it doesn't come back to, say you're saying about the need for infrastructure first and then development. But it all depends on what you need to build.
Yes, no, I do.
Thanks. I would like to say I think one of the things people can do now is, if there's a position open on your local council, town council, RDC, stand for it. Stand for those positions. Help Connor, because he spends a lot of time doing this stuff, and he is largely on his own doing it. He's one voice in the council, and there are many, many councillors. So if you stood and took the positions yourselves, you can back each other up like that. I think the other thing that I wanted to say as well is, amongst the things that you mentioned that people consider infrastructure, a couple of the things that people often forget is electricity supply, water supply. They are boring things that nobody takes into consideration. When it comes to things like hosepipe bans that get imposed, we get told it's because of climate change or because of so many leaks under the ground and the water companies are responsible. But when was the last time reservoirs were built? When was the last time a pumping station was put in? It's that kind of stuff that also gets forgotten, and the people who actually pay for that infrastructure are the people who are already living in the area before homes get put up. So I think some of this consideration that you've been mentioning needs to be lent towards that kind of infrastructure as well.
Absolutely. I think I'm being told we must wrap up. It's past my bedtime, so I need to go to sleep. But I'd just like to thank everybody for coming. I was only expecting a small table of people, but we filled the whole pub, so it's lovely to see. There will be more. I'm being told I must be quiet, so I shall now hand over to the Vice Chair, Teresa. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yes, thank you everybody, very, very much indeed. I've got to call the raffle just now, but before I do, because people start slipping out, if you use Facebook, and I do recommend that you use Facebook because it's not a bad thing if you use it properly, you'll find that there is a group on there called the Rother Forum, and you will find out what we're doing, what information we've got. You can make comments, you can send messages. It's a very, very good way to communicate with us. So now, let's get to the raffle. We have 3